Hi, in this video, we are adding rational numbers. And when I say rational numbers, I'm talking about these fractions here. A negative fraction and a positive fraction, they're both rational numbers. In a different video, I'm adding decimals. And if you'd like to watch that, I'll link to that. But in here, we'll just get right into it. And the first thing we need to do when we have fractions and we're adding them is we need common denominators. So I'm going to set up my new fractions here, and my new denominator is going to be 6. The reason why it's 6 is because 3 multiplies to 6 and 2 also multiplies to 6. So that's my new denominator. It's called the least common multiple. So what I do is I figure out, well, how many times does 3 go into 6? And 3 goes into 6 2 times. So I multiply negative 2 times 2, and I get negative 4. And I do the same thing here. How many times does 2 go into 6? 2 goes into 6 3 times. And I multiply the numerator, 1 times 3, and I get 3. Now what we have to do is we have to add negative 4 plus 3. And if you're not good at doing that, you should go back to a previous video where I add integers. But assuming you're good at that, and I'll link to that video as well, assuming that you're good at that, we'll just say negative 4 plus 3, that is negative 1. And now we're ready for our answer. It's negative 1 over 6. So here's a second question. Negative 4/5 plus negative 1/3. And in this problem, I have the operation of addition and the sign of negative. And the parentheses separates the operation from the sign. So just like in the other problem, we have to change our denominators. So I'll set this up, and we are adding them. And I'm thinking, well, what number will 5 and 3 both multiply to? They both multiply to 15. And that makes 15 our new denominator. And now I have to think about, well, how many times does 5 go into 15? And that goes in 3 times. So I multiply negative 4 times 3. Right here, I'm multiplying this negative 4 times 3. And that is negative 12. And then I'm thinking about, well, how many times does 3 go into 15? And 3 goes into 15 5 times. So I'm multiplying negative 1 times 5. Oops. And negative 1 times 5 is negative 5. And so now I will take negative 12 plus negative 5. And I know that's negative 17. And that goes over our new denominator of 15. And that is the answer to that problem. Now, sometimes your teacher might want you to turn this into a mixed number. And if that's the case, then you would think, well, how many times does 15 go into 17? 15 goes into 17 one time. So that's equal to 1 time, with 2 left over, and out of 15. So you can have either. Personally, I like to have, if I'm allowed to leave my answer as an improper fraction, or a fraction larger than 1, then I'll do so. Because the less work I have to do is the less chance that I'll make a mistake. If I have to do an extra step, I could make a mistake from that point. So we got a new question, and this one is negative 1/3 plus negative 4/9. Again, the parentheses separating the operation from the sign. And this is already addition, so we can go right into making our common denominators. And I'll set up my fractions here. And I'm thinking, well, what number will 3 and 9 both multiply to? Well, 3 will multiply to 9, and 9 will multiply by itself one time. So our least common denominator is 9. And students will usually, they may pick 9, but oftentimes they'll pick 18, and they'll just skip over the idea of just using 9. Okay. So I'm thinking, well, how many times does 3 go into 9? It goes in 3 times. So now I multiply -1 times 3, and that is -3. And then I figure out, well, how many times does 9 go into 9? That goes in 1 time. And then now I multiply -4 times 1, which is -4. And finally, I'm all set to add -3 plus -4. And -3 plus -4 is -7. And that goes over 9. And that is my answer, -7/9. And here is another where we have -1/2 plus 4/5. We need a common denominator. And that common denominator, I'll set this up. That will be 10. So a new numerator or denominator, I'll put this in red, is 10. And now we're thinking, well, how many times does 2 go into 10? And it goes into 10 5 times. So now I multiply -1 times 5, and that is -5. And then figure out, well, how many times does 5 go into 10? 5 goes into 10 2 times. And then I multiply 4 times -2. I'm sorry, just 4 times 2. And that's 8. And finally, I can add -5 plus 8. And -5 plus 8, that's 3. And that goes over 10. And I have my answer to that. So I'm hoping you feel better about adding these rational number fractions. And let me know how it goes.